Hi all, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Thursday, March 2, 2023, and you're watching WGAN-TV live at 5. We have a super awesome, super geeky show for you today. Matterport Service Provider's understanding level of detail, level of development meets Matterport Pro3 Camera. And our subject matter expert today to visit on this topic is Robotic Imaging Chief Operations Officer, Will Buzan. Hey, Will, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Dan, appreciate you having me on here, and excited to discuss this stuff with you. I think it's really important for everyone, every MSP provider to understand some of these topics in as much detail as possible. So
exactly, that's why we're going to do the show. Before
Perfect.
we jump into the topic, though, Will, how about giving us context about robotic imaging?
Sure. Yeah. So robotic imaging, we do a bunch of different types of reality capture services. So we do Matterport scanning, as well as some of the high definition laser scanning as well, utilizing a lot of the Leica products. So Leica P50. RTC 360, BLK 360. We have a few Faro products too, and really what we specialize is converting that laser scan data to usable BIM and CAD files for design teams, so architects, engineers, and then construction professionals, and for owners, developers to be able to utilize that information as well.
Awesome. I was listening to the different scanners you have, and it sounds like from a LiDAR scanner from $6,000, the Matterport Pro3 camera, all the way up to the Leica P50, $150,000 scanner, and scanners in between.
Yep.
You all are based in Philadelphia. What is actually your coverage area?
So we have an office in Philadelphia, an office in New York. We will cover any area in the country. Depending on the project size, we'll fly anywhere and go out and do a scan for someone. But headquartered right in Philly, and then New York as well.
And number of employees?
Right now we have 12 full-time, and then obviously a ton of contractors and a bunch of part-time people as well.
Okay, awesome. So let's begin maybe trying to understand what jobs in the AEC space can Matterport service providers do with a Matterport Pro3 camera. So when I say
Sure.
AEC, I'm talking about architects, engineers, general contractors, and then I think there's two other categories that robotic imaging does a lot of work for. Is owners, developers, and owners may also be the developer. So I'm thinking about those kind of 5 categories or sweet spots. And so I'm just going to run through a list, and maybe you can say yes,
sure,
no, yes, and no. So we'd go through that list, and then we'll do a deeper dive to understand your answers. Is that cool?
Sure, sounds good.
First up on the list, any space that the AEC community is using for marketing purposes where measurements don't matter, it's totally about the visuals.
Yes, certainly.
Indoors.
Yes.
Outdoors.
Yes.
Large spaces.
Yes.
High ceilings.
Yes.
And these are all spaces that you would typically use a Matterport Pro3 camera if it's for marketing purposes. Measurements don't matter.
If the measurements don't matter at all, you could use a Pro 2 or a Pro 3. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. In fact, it may be helpful for context for today's show. I'm assuming that our audience either Matterport service providers or that has a Pro3 camera, or a Matterport service provider that's on the edge of their seat. They're ready to buy a Matterport Pro3 camera, and maybe today's show will help them decide either yes to go forward or no, hold off on that.
Definitely.
So the first category I'm hearing is anything where you're doing where only the visuals matter for the Matterport 3D tour, perfectly fine. Use your Pro 2, Pro 3, as long as measurements don't matter.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now, in the AEC space, where measurements do matter.
Yes.
Outdoor elevations.
I would say no, or be very, cautious about it.
Okay, we'll come back and ask in detail.
Yeah, of course.
As-builts.
Depends on the project, I would say.
Ordering a Matterport E57 file using a Pro 3 camera where measurements matter.
Yes, it could be helpful.
Ordering a Matterport MatterPak using a Matterport Pro 3 camera.
Also, yes, could be helpful.
Accuracy of measurements matter, and you're shooting large commercial space.
I would say no.
Accuracy matters, and you're shooting empty land.
That's very project specific, probably, I would say.
Okay, so this is helpful.
Yeah.
And so I think for context, it's probably helpful to understand what these terms are. Yeah. Level of detail, level of development, sometimes abbreviated LOD. What are these terms? Can you show us examples? And maybe that'll help us understand your original answers for yes, no, maybe, depends on the project.
Sure. So, yeah, so really what LOD, level of development is, it's a combination of a lot of different, various components and information. But how we like to break it down is the level of development of a BIM model is a combination of the level of geometry. So it's LOG is the abbreviation for that. And also the level of information that's stored in that model. So just to break that down, level of geometry is pretty self-explanatory. It's how much geometry that's in a building is being represented in that model. So for example, if you have a door, maybe LOD 200, it would just be the opening, and all you'd be able to take is maybe the width and the height of it. Whereas LOD 300, you might be able to take, get accurate measurements of the door framing, and maybe even like the paneling. And then 350, you might have, accurate, doorknob if there's any like intricate architectural details, like that might be shown represented in the model visually. And that's basically, LOG, level of geometry. And then level of information is the amount of information that is stored within each of the components in the model. So, say you have a piece of equipment, it could store, a maintenance schedule or, just any information like that isn't necessarily geometric, but could provide value to a construction project. So that really, the combination of both of those total up to give you the level of development of a BIM model. And so, there's LOD 100, LOD 200, LOD 300, LOD 350, LOD 400, and 500 are typically the numbers that people use to explain LOD. So I wouldn't say necessarily that using a Matterport only allows you to do a certain, just do LOD 200 models. It's more so that, the information and the geometry that you actually can pull from reality capture data in general is able to give you a higher LOD. So as far as the finite details that can be collected from high definition laser scanning versus Matterport, that might be able to give you more intricate details that you can put into a model. But generally speaking, Matterport, LiDAR scanning can all kind of get you to the same LOD, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm actually confused on that point because excuse me, as a marketing person, I'm looking for a very simple answer, which is
Sure.
Matterport Pro3 Camera, LOD 100, LOD 200, LOD 300, LOD 350. And I'm hearing that it's not black and white. Does it depend in part on the technique that the Matterport service provider scanning the space of, did they do the scans close together? Did they capture more data? Did they capture it at different heights? And therefore there was enough geometry in order to, using the door as an example, know the height and width of the door, know the depth perhaps of the crown molding, and know even whatever the next level was to get us to 350. Is it possible with the Matterport Pro3 camera that you could get there?
So obviously, the more you scan, the more data points you get, the more finite the lines in the point cloud are, and the more geometry you can put into a model. So obviously, scanning more with the Matterport around particular items that need that higher level of detail will allow you to achieve more. It's really not black and white, but I would say like LOD 200 and 300, you can easily achieve with Matterport. It's where you get into the LOD 350, LOD 400 of, crown molding or, intricate architectural, details where the Matterport data is not nearly as good as like an RTC, which shoots, 3 million points a second.
Okay, this is a Leica RTC 360 camera.
Yes.
Before we do a little bit deeper dive into looking at point clouds, let's take a look at Matterport point cloud versus a Leica RTC 360 point cloud. Before we get there, you mentioned doors, and when I think of AEC space, I think of things like floors, windows, walls, columns, and doors. Why does all this stuff matter at these different levels of detail to an architect or a general contractor or someone that's in this space, or maybe even to an owner or a developer of a commercial project?
Yeah, so I mean, it just really depends on what's trying to be achieved with the project. So if you're doing like just a fit out of a commercial space, obviously the main thing that's important for doors specifically is just like the location, and you probably just need to know the width just to make sure it's to code.
Is typically what's going to happen is the client is actually going to say, I need LOD 100, I need LOD 200, I need LOD 300, I need LOD 350. Is it black and white, and that a client can communicate that to you? And then you determine which tool is the right tool for the right task? Yeah,
so I mean, some architects are pretty knowledgeable on it. A lot aren't. I've found that the better way to kind of understand the scope from their end is to really have a conversation about what specifically needs to be shown in the model or drawings to be able to determine that stuff. LOD is kind of a blanket term. So like, if basically there's, there could be an LOD for every component in the building, and they could all be different depending on what the project requires. So, when I'm talking to a customer and they tell me LOD 300, I have a picture in my head of what the whole BIM model is going to look like. but it's not necessarily exactly what they need as far as every component goes.
So even if a client says, I need LOD 350, it sounds like you're going to probe anyway what their expectations are in whatever drawings that you're creating for them. Is that what robotic imaging is doing, is creating the drawing, or are you providing different data files to the client, or it just depends?
Yeah, I mean, usually point clouds work best with Revit, so which is the main BIM program. So we usually do all of our modeling in there, and then you can create drawings in Revit that work with AutoCAD or most other design softwares as well.
Okay. Maybe it's helpful if we actually take a look at the scan data.
Sure.
Do you want to show us perhaps tell us what you're going to show us and help us understand why it matters?
Sure. So let me see here.
Incidentally, while Will is setting up, you can check out robotic imaging at roboticimaging.com. Okay.
All right. So can you see this all right?
Yes.
So this is RTC data from like a top.
For clarification, this was from a Leica RTC 360 laser scanner, an $80,000 scanner.
Yes.
Okay. And the file format is called.
So this is an RCS file, so it's compatible with Autodesk products. But really, I mean, you can get an E57 file from our RTC 360 data. You can get a whole bunch of different files, which I don't need to get into, but.
Okay. And so this file was actually direct from the camera and exported, has nothing to do with Matterport. You just want to kind of show us what an $80,000 scanner can produce and why that matters. Yeah.
This is there's a few softwares to get to this point from the scanner, but yeah, this has nothing to do with the Matterport, this data right here. But so this is just a raw.
Well, help me understand how you got here. Were you exporting a file and it went into Autodesk Recap, and from Recap you exported an RCS file, and then from that RCS you imported it into Revit or some other workflow? Right.
So you go out and scan with an RTC 360 exactly like you would scan with a Matterport. Setting up the tripod in different locations throughout, making sure everything's visual line of sight. You can use an iPad to register the data on site, so it's a similar kind of view as Matterport there. So for clarification, again, our audience is Matterport service providers, and this may not be obvious, but when you say the word register, that's like taking, if I think about two 360s that overlap showing the same space, then aligning those manually, something that Matterport does automatically, but the like a RTC 360 doesn't do this registering process. That is a manual task. Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's essentially the same exact thing as that. It's like stitching the different scans together based off of similar geometries in the building. And I can show you what that looks like. Sure, that'd be great. Maybe you could separate, two scans to show where they've already been aligned. Sure. So this is these red dots here. These are like the raw BLK. This is a BLK scan, but it's like a BLK 360. But it's very similar process to the RTC 360. Okay, I don't see where you're pointing. Oh, did it not share the other screen here? I'm just looking at the same original screen. Let me switch. Okay. Switch this here. All right, can you see this all right? Probably in a second. Yeah, now I can see the different points. Yeah, so looks like a Lego set. Yeah. Yeah, so these red dots, these are each scan setup here. So it's something's bugging out. So was a color scan, so it does take a photo as well. But it's also collecting like that LiDAR data as well. So how these are stitched together is basically, let me give you a better example than that.
It might be suffice to say you're sliding it into position, and and there you go. And so
this is a point cloud of one scan. This is a point cloud of another scan. And you're manually, or, there's an algorithm that assists you, but lining up the similar geometries in the building so that they, like the cloud to cloud matchup, overlaps.
Okay, so we're looking at the scan data from an $80,000 scanner. Do you happen to have the same space that was done with the Matterport Pro3 camera?
I do not have that data. Unfortunately,
that's okay. Had you completed this project with the Matterport Pro3 camera, what would you have expected when you exported either the Matterport MatterPak or the Matterport E57 file to begin this workflow? How would it have compared?
So this program I would not have needed to touch at all. I'll go back to that other screen, or to another screen I have up here.
Mm-hmm.
So can you see this all right?
Yes.
So this is, let me pull, and can you see this this file browser here at all?
Where are you on your screen? I see your arrow, your cursor moving, your arrow moving.
Okay, so it's not showing this at the same time. Let me go back here. Anyway, not super important. You download the E57, and this is recap, Autodesk recap, and you basically just drag and drop that E57 file directly from Matterport. And this is where the process starts, right here for that. So this is the point cloud from the E57 file in Autodesk recap. So the main difference between the MatterPak, which gives you the point cloud file that gives you is an XYZ file. The main difference between that and this is that the E57 is a structured point cloud, which means that it has the metadata that includes these photospheres. So the actual photospheres are stored in the point cloud.
Okay.
So if you have a MatterPak, in this or the XYZ from the MatterPak in this view, you're not seeing any of these photospheres. It's just an unstructured, just the raw data.
Okay. So for clarification, the Matterport E57 file includes these photospheres that we're looking at.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Let's do this. Let's take it off screen share if I may.
Sure.
I'm tempted to say we're getting in a little bit
too deep here.
Too deep, because I think what'll happen is, okay, I'm a Matterport service provider. I'm just trying to understand, can I use my Matterport Pro3 camera, or can I to do outdoor elevations, as built, etc. And so I'm really trying to understand, well, so, what's the difference about the data that's collected? Are we just simply talking about, well, it's accuracy? You pay for $150,000 scanner will be more accurate than an $80,000, than a $60,000, than $50,000, than an $18,000.
Honestly, that's really, getting rid of all the other stuff. That's really what it boils down to, Dan. It's really just the accuracy and like the density of the point cloud that you can get to be able to get the details that I was talking about a little bit earlier.
So let's go back to outdoor elevations for a moment to talk about that topic. I think what I heard was, can I use a Matterport Pro3 camera to do outdoor elevations? And I think what I heard was it depends on the project. Is that?
Yeah, the project, the building,
Now,
type.
is
And
that because it depends on the size? Meaning, if I only need 10, feet in order to capture signage, or the base of the building is not more than a couple hundred feet, then the chance for the error to magnify is not as great? Or can I use a Pro3 camera, but I need to bring a handheld laser measurer in
yeah,
order to, I don't know what the word would be, true up
yeah,
the model to
yeah,
make sure that it, and if the model from Matterport came back at 100 feet, but the space measured 100 feet and 3 inches, that the model needs to be scaled to 100 feet and 3 inches, essentially.
yeah. So I guess a good way to think about it is the Pro3, the laser that comes from it only shoots 60 meters, I think. Is the maximum. I think that's the number.
Yeah, so the stat I have on the Matterport Pro3 camera, according to Matterport support page, is plus or minus 20 millimeters at 10 meters, which would be 33 feet about.
Right.
So I want to say it scans way farther than that,
Yeah.
but they're talking about the level of accuracy.
Yeah.
So if you need the level of accuracy of 20 millimeters, which I think is about 3/4 of an inch, you need to have your scans at least within 33 feet. Even if I want to say the scan sees 150 feet, your measurements are just going to get way off. So you just can't move the camera 150 feet at a time, even if you were successful in accomplishing those scans, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I still want to understand. I mean, if somebody called up robotics imaging and said, I need an outdoor elevation of my commercial space.
Yeah.
Would you do that with the Pro3 camera? Or like, no way, Jose, you're going to use your BLK 360 or a Leica RTC 360 or something else?
Yeah, we would never use Matterport Pro3 for exterior elevations. I mean, for one reason, obviously, because we have the other utilities to
yes, okay, but I'm a Matterport service provider. I don't have a $150,000 scanner. I just have my Matterport Pro3 camera that's $6,000. Can I use it to do outdoor elevations?
Yeah. So I mean, I can give you a look at like the data of exterior. Like our decision on that is just from looking at the data and the thickness of like those lines at something that's more than 10 meters away is something
let's not look at the data, but let's talk about the data. So when you look at the Matterport Pro3 camera data, are you looking at the Matterport MatterPak version or the Matterport E57 file?
The E57, but they're both pretty similar.
Okay, so you start looking at the data file, and it sounds like Robotic Imaging has concluded that Robotic Imaging would not use a Matterport Pro3 camera on outdoor elevations.
Yeah, we wouldn't. And just like as you touched on this, at 10 meters, it's 20 millimeters. That's 3/4 of an inch. A lot of architects are looking for 1/2 inch in the drawings itself, which that's already over the limit, like even without the interpretation into the drawings. So like
interpretation meaning to bring a laser measurer with you and rescale it,
as for bringing like the point cloud into a design software and taking measurements off of it, essentially.
Okay. But could you resize it? Robotic Imaging, an architect, if you knew to true it up, could you do that in the program?
I don't think you can actually scale it differently. You could take like a photo and scale the photo of like a 2D of like a facade. But yeah, I mean, if I would say like Matterport data would be great on the exterior if you supplement it with some kind of manual measurements with like a laser pointer, where you get the overall dimensions that are needed, and then maybe the Matterport can just fill in any
provided that that's okay with your client. So you
right.
essentially are managing the expectation of your client to say, look, I can use this $6,000 tool, but it's not a $50,000
Yeah.
scanner. It'll cost you less to engage me with the $6,000 scanner than it will somebody who's got a $50,000 scanner. But you're not going to have the measurements as accurate. I can tell you with the laser measure what to true it up. Does that work for you? Is that a reasonable thing to say to an architect?
Yeah, and as long as you explicitly explain what Matterport says about its accuracy tolerances,
yes,
that's something that that is definitely
Do you believe that plus or minus 20 millimeters at 10 meters?
I think that's probably pretty accurate. Usually the laser scanning specs are pretty good.
So here, I'm confused for two reasons. And I think your answer on as-built was the same. It depends on the project. You'd be reluctant to use a Matterport Pro3 camera. You have all these other scanners, your confidence level, where accuracy matters, that you would try to move the client to a different tool that is designed for the scope of the work.
Yeah.
Okay, so here I'm confused for two reasons. First, is a member of the We Get Around Network forum, WGAN-forum.com. He writes, I use all my scans from my Matterport Pro3 camera to produce as-built surveys. I do spot dimensions inside and on elevations when I'm on site. I have found that the Pro3 point cloud to be accurate. I have purchased both the MatterPak and the E57 file for projects for comparison. So he has some issues using it, but he's using it and he's a service provider and he's doing that for clients. Do you think he's kind of at risk because the level of accuracy may be a challenge, or no, his clients are accepting it, that's okay?
Well, I guess it depends on what his clients consider accurate. There's obviously levels to that when it comes to construction and what's required. But the fact that he's taken like spot elevations and doing those measurements to confirm those dimensions is, that's what the traditional architectural documentation surveying would be. They would go out and take those measurements, and then that data really helps to supplement that. So I think that's probably a solid workflow.
Okay.
In most cases.
Will, let me ask you about something that now I'm really totally confused. Totally confused. Because I can go to the Matterport website and go to the Matterport support website, and Matterport sells a product called BIM file.
Sure.
And they write on their website, if I'm interpreting what they've written correctly, it was updated as of yesterday, last night, March 1, 2023. The level of detail can be 200, 300, and even 350. And the cameras that they say can produce this are the Matterport Pro2 camera, Matterport Pro3 camera, Leica BLK 360 first generation. Matterport has said they'll support the second generation Leica BLK 360, but they haven't told us when. So now, if I go down to like a Matterport Pro2, and I haven't even looked up the measurements, the accuracy recently, but even just staying on the Matterport Pro3, does it make you nervous that someone could order a BIM file from Matterport with the expectation that the level of accuracy could be LOD 200, LOD 300, LOD 350, and it was created using a Matterport Pro3 camera?
What do you mean by make me nervous?
You all create BIM documents
for our company, or for just like the production of it in general?
Are you nervous in behalf of people that do this?
Oh, okay.
I want to say robotic imaging, you create all kinds of drawings, anywhere from BIM models to construction drawings. Is that the case? Am I overstating?
We don't do construction models.
Not construction, but you'll do a BIM model LOD 100, 200, 300, 350.
Yeah.
And you're doing that from scanners that cost up to 150,000.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can ask the question differently. if your team wasn't available today to do those, and you were in a pinch and you needed a BIM file at LOD 100, 200, 300, 350, and all you had was a Pro3, and you uploaded it to Matterport, would you have a confidence level that that BIM file can produce something as high as an LOD 350? Or am I mixing terms and there's a difference between LOD and accuracy of measurement?
They're kind of two different things. Like I said, LOD is more the level of geometry and information in the model, and then the level of accuracy is that this model is a quarter inch accurate to reality. And if you go out and verify that in real life, like, you're gonna get every measurement's going to be like within a quarter inch.
Okay, well, I'm still confused. So let's go back. Let's say I place an order. I use a Matterport Pro3 camera. I place an order with Matterport for in my Matterport cloud account. I go to add-ons. I select BIM file. I pay for the BIM file for my model.
Yeah.
And I specify LOD 350. And tell me again what that's going to include. If I'm looking at a door frame, I can understand the measurements of the crown molding and the depth of the doorknob. Is that reasonable?
So I don't think that that's what Matterport does with their LOD scales. I'm not. We've never ordered from them in that regard. I wish I had a little bit of more of a background to like kind of pick on that, but I would imagine that they might be using LOD to, incorporate like a higher LOD means that there's mechanical equipment in there maybe, or MEP or duct or more.
Yes, because you can order the BIM file for architecture that includes furniture or MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, interior furniture, and so forth.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, okay, so if I'm the Matterport service provider and I have a Matterport Pro3 camera, do I just, like, if I know that somebody's going to need a BIM file of an MEP space, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, that I should scan very close together, maybe at different elevations, and in order to help Matterport be able to render and I'm sure it's outsourced. I keep saying Matterport, and I'm sure they use third-party company to do this, but to enable that Matterport BIM file to be as accurate as possible, or is it going to be like, oh, you get this BIM file and it's got MEP stuff, and now you want to do some measurements, and it turns out it was shot with a Pro 2 or a Pro 3, and you have some angst. That's what I'm wondering. I have angst. I'm wondering if you have angst. You do this for a living. I'm just the marketing person. Would you have angst either for your company using it, Robotic Imaging, or for anyone that's actually ordering from Matterport? Does it make you nervous at all, or it's not your product, you're not going to worry about it?
It would make, if I had to, I wouldn't be opposed to trying it, because we have the ability to take that and edit it or adjust it however we need to. But it would make me a little nervous getting something that I would want to work with.
Okay, so I think this actually brings us to disclaimers. So I think you have some tips for Matterport service providers. So if you're a Matterport service provider and your client has asked you to do an outdoor elevation or an as-built, and or to deliver a Matterport E57 file, some other variation of that you want it, what do you want to tell them in terms of qualifying, so that you don't get into deep doo-doo, spending 5 days scanning a super large space only to find out that it didn't meet the client's needs?
Yeah, I mean, as far as disclaimers go, I would definitely, with every deliverable, especially like a BIM model or a CAD or a floor plan or something like that, put some kind of disclaimer that says that that these drawings are not for construction. and, maybe even like measurements should be like, field verified before doing any construction, because we even do that with laser scan data, because it's we're not, licensed professionals to create like those kinds of drawings. So, and it's, it's a common practice, obviously, to have, field verification for those measurements. So it just gives you some room to, get out of that liability zone for any inaccurate measurements. And then another thing is, you don't want to be responsible for any issues during the construction process with like change orders, or something not fitting right that would cause $100,000 replacement order or something like that. So like putting some kind of legal verbiage that says that you're not liable for that kind of stuff, because you're not a professional in the architecture space.
You're not a licensed architect. You're not a licensed surveyor. You
Exactly.
can't provide a stamp on any documents to
Exactly.
say something. So, go find some language to go put on your marketing proposal,
Yeah.
on your deliverables, and on your invoice. Anywhere you have an interaction to document it with your client, to disclaim.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm hearing is, even when you're using your Leica P50, $150,000 scanner, you're still putting disclaimers on it.
Oh yeah.
So if you're putting disclaimers on a $150,000 scanner that obviously has much higher level of accuracy than using a Matterport Pro3 camera, you really probably want to put a lot of disclaimers, because the measurements could be off. I guess maybe just to give a little metaphor here is, my wife and I had our bathroom remodeled. I did a little Matterport three-dimensional model of the existing, I would call that as built, gave it to the architect. The architect was able to import it into SketchUp, reimagine what our bathroom, come back to us and say, here's what it's going to look like. But when the gentleman that came out to install the glass in the shower, he didn't rely on the measurements in the Matterport model. He brought his own laser measuring device. Okay. So maybe Matterport's it's good enough to like visualize the space. It's good enough maybe to do some rough estimating, but it's certainly not good enough to generate construction documents or anything that needs to be measured. You're going to install a window. The trade that installs the windows, they need to measure themselves. They're not going to rely on third-party data anyway.
Yeah, and you should field verify before putting anything expensive in anyway. So it's it's really good for visualization and to be able to get a good starting point on any kind of design.
Okay. Anything else a Matterport service provider should be super careful about using a Matterport Pro3 camera if we're talking about it, trying to do an outdoor elevation or an as-built?
I don't think so. I think like I said, it's just the communicating with your client and making sure that they understand that this is how the accuracy tolerances are laid out.
I was hoping you're going to give us an easy answer and say, hey, Matterport Pro3 camera, LOD 100, LOD 200, LOD 300, LOD 350. And the answer is, it's not black and white, and it depends on the project, the scope of the work, how the client's going to use the deliverable, ask a lot of questions. If you're a Matterport service provider and you're like, oh my God, this is like so over my head, you're not the one who's going to have to go buy all this Autodesk, Recap, AutoCAD, Revit, download up. All you need to do is really ask your client, and then maybe even provide them a sample of your output to say, hey, this is an example. Does that meet your needs?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great idea before getting into all the purchasing and everything. And free trials, like going in and just testing and And then getting client feedback is always the move, I think.
Okay. So if you're new at it, you might as well do that anyways, to say, hey, happy to come out to your space, happy to give you an E57 file.
Yeah.
By the way, many architects might not know what to do with an E57 file. Is that the case?
Yeah.
So,
for the most part.
So maybe that leads us to maybe how to partner with robotic imaging at the point that you feel like you've just gotten in over your Matterport service provider, you've gotten in over your head. You have a trusted client. They've engaged you for other projects for marketing purposes where the visuals matter. Now they're starting to ask you about the, hey, can you provide a point cloud file? Can you provide an E57 file? Can you provide a BIM file? And those words maybe start to get a little bit scary for a Matterport service provider that maybe is a real estate photographer. How does a MSP, a Matterport service provider, partner with robotic imaging?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just being able to talk you through the process is something that we're more than happy to help people out with. But as far as what we are able to produce, if MSP providers are starting to get in their foot in the door with any architects or engineers, is that we can, take your scan from anywhere from just, sending us the E57 from Matterport all the way to, a BIM model or any floor plans, exterior elevations, section drawings that an architect might need for existing conditions to start their design. So, it's just, and then again, like I said, feel free to reach out if you just have any questions or anything like that. We're more than happy to explain how everything, kind of works from our line of sight, being, doing this stuff every day. So.
Okay. All right. So you can reach robotic imaging at roboticimaging.com. So I think what I'm hearing is a few things. One, if you just need some guidance and you feel like you're stuck and you need a resource to bounce a question off, contact robotic imaging. Two, it may be that what the client is asking for is beyond the scope of a Matterport Pro3 camera's capability. And then you could partner with robotic imaging to say, oh, well, they'll bring in a service provider in your market that has the appropriate scanner. May sound something like a RTC 360, like a P series, P40, P50, some scanner that may cost $40, $50, $60, $150,000 and scan the space. And then how you figure out, whether the client is owned by the Matterport service provider and you're subcontracting, or whether you figure out maybe you're a little bit over your head, you really want to have robotic imaging take the lead and figure out how to compensate you in that equation. I may be saying too many words there, but I think it's possible to figure out what makes sense for the client, for the Matterport service provider, for robotics imaging.
Yeah. 100% agree. Yeah, just like you said, a project comes up that, seems very complicated. There's a lot of other solutions besides Matterport that can get the job done. So just being able, to help your client in that regard is people keep coming to you for that stuff. So
yeah, I think about the right tool for the right job. Sometimes, a hammer is perfectly fine, and maybe that's equivalent to a Matterport Pro3 camera. And sometimes you need an automatic nail gun for putting the roof in, and you would never get up on the roof with a hammer individually nailing in roof pieces. There's the right tool for the right job. And just because you own a Matterport Pro3 camera doesn't necessarily mean it's the right tool. And you might get into some hot water if you're trying to use a tool that you have when it's not the exact right tool for the job. How many Matterport Pro3 cameras do you have?
We have 2 right now. Just got the second one recently.
Okay. And do you know if you're planning to buy some more, or 2 at the moment's fine?
I think we're good for the moment, but I mean, I mean, we love the Pro 3.
Why is that?
So, I mean, we use it all for like the visual, and it speeds up our time on site so much, just being able to, one, stretch it farther, and then also like, way less misalignments we're seeing. And it seems like it's like a couple seconds faster too,
Mhm.
the spin time.
Plus, you can move the Matterport Pro3 camera with greater distance between
Exactly. Yeah,
scans, and the walking experience is fine, and the scans connect.
exactly.
So, my understanding is that robotic imaging actually typically does 2 techs on site for any given job. One is doing the visual, doing that with the Matterport Pro3 camera, and then there's another tech on site using a higher end LiDAR scanner. So you're essentially scanning the space twice, because there's 2 different use cases. One is for the visuals to tell the story, and then the other is you need the scan data, but your clients are typically needed at a much greater level of accuracy than the Matterport Pro3 camera. Did I say that okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm guessing you bought the second Matterport Pro3 camera in part because one, it's faster, so you're probably not just the rotation, but moving it. So since you can move it a greater distance, you're probably completing jobs in half the time or a third of the time. Does that sound right?
Yeah, especially in like big open spaces.
Big open
It's a dream.
spaces. Second, in big open spaces, the scans are actually not misaligning. That was probably a very difficult process for robotic imaging. I imagine you go out on site with the Pro 2 doing a large open space, and you have to budget for a lot of misalignment time.
Yeah, like I mean, for like giant spaces, you'd have to break it up into multiple, like, say 120,000 square foot warehouse. There's no way you could get that whole thing in one Pro 2 tour. The Pro
And with the
3
Matterport Pro 3 camera,
it gets it easily. Yeah.
easy peasy.
And
so one was speed, 2 was large open spaces.
Yeah.
3, I imagine, is outdoors.
Outdoors, so 2 things with that. It helps our team with like the modeling, to be able to like have that immersive experience outside rather than just 360s.
For clarification, your team, let's see, I'm a little bit distracted. I'm going to say your team includes Groovy. I'm looking at Groovy and
Groovy loves the Matterport.
Your dog, and making a cameo, upstaging you here. So Groovy. So that just for clarification, the reason your team is modeling in BIM and they're using this data, but it's way easier for them to actually be as if they're there looking at the visuals from Matterport Pro3 camera Matterport tour. Yeah.
And then for for the customer, it's just an overall, just a better like presentation. Is just being able to walk outside. So yeah, overall we love it. We're not going to buy another Pro 2. We're definitely Pro 3 from here on out. So
and how many BLK 360 first generations do you have?
We have 3.
3.
Yep.
I'm going to guess you wouldn't buy any more of those, would you?
No, that we just got 2 second generations, and they're a dream. So
you're happy with the second generation like a BLK 360.
Yeah.
Would you ever use those paired with Matterport, or no, not really? You like to have your data exported. And
so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you know if that compatibility is there yet with
Matterport has publicly said they are going to support the Leica BLK 360 second generation. They have not put a date behind that.
Yeah, I think we would be really excited about that because, even though it auto aligns everything itself in Matterport, we could still pull the scan data off and do our own registration, and then it's kind of just one person on site rather than 2.
Because the visuals is good enough with the Leica BLK 360 second generation
for what we do.
For what you do.
Yeah.
So you're maybe the subtlety here is you're documenting maybe a building that's going to be for sale. The client's trying to figure out what to do with it. Maybe they just bought the asset. They want to like share with a lot of people in different states what it is that they bought. Maybe they're going to market it for sale, but they're not making it pristine, beautiful, best quality pictures. They're just documenting it. We just need the space quickly documented.
Yeah, so like for an architectural team that just needs to understand how the space is laid out, the photo quality is plenty good enough.
Okay. Will, is there anything that we didn't talk about in terms of understanding level of detail, level of development meets Matterport Pro3 Camera that like, oh, I didn't ask you, but we really should cover it?
I don't think so. I hope that I know that this stuff gets pretty complicated pretty quick. So I hope, I did a good job kind of laying it out, and you and the rest of the network have a little bit better understanding of how LOD is kind of not just black and white. It's a lot of moving parts and different types of interpretations for that meaning. So I encourage everyone to just do their own research and continue to improve that understanding, for your customers.
Yeah, I think I'll start a discussion in the We Get Around Network forum. I think one of my takeaways is put a lot of verbiage around your deliverable at the time you quote, at the time you deliver, and at the time you invoice. And maybe we could crowdsource like what some of that verbiage is that might be helpful
Sure.
to the community. I'm not a lawyer, I don't give legal advice, but I think a lot of we could crowdsource enough people to say, hey, these are some interesting disclaimers. You might still want to check with your lawyer. But I think one of my takeaways is be super careful about what you promise, what you commit to, what you're capable of doing with the Matterport Pro3 camera. Maybe give a sample to your client before you undertake a 5-day scanning project. Let them tell you that what you're providing to them as a Matterport Pro3 camera shot tour, delivered with the addition of a Matterport E57 file. Again, not everybody's going to know what to do with that E57 file. Might still have to, talk to Robotic imaging about helping provide a deliverable that goes with it, but get your potential client to agree to what you're actually going to deliver. I guess managing expectations is probably my key takeaway.
Exactly.
Yeah. Will, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Dan. It's good speaking with you.
And you. We've been visiting with Robotic Imaging Chief Operations Officer Will Buzan. Will is based in Philadelphia, offices also in New York. And for Will, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum, and you've been watching WGAN.